Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, and it's time for another Let's Build Citizen live stream, so let's get started. Okay, hello. Folks will need half a second to join up here. Hey, Melanie. I'm glad to see you. Starting a little bit later today. And I want to give everybody half a second to join up if they want to, but I will probably put in the chat as usual. Watch the playback to get caught up. That way I don't have to wait for everybody to show up. So today. Yesterday we were working on the WYSIWYG, which I was enjoying quite a bit. So much, in fact, that I put in, like a solid 10 and a half hour stream just working on this thing. I don't know why, but I'm just having a good time doing it. It's one of those things that's a really, targeted project, and there's lots of interesting challenges, and I'm learning about the web platform and the document object model, and so I'm sort of enjoying it. And so unfortunately, I think I'm not going to be able to keep working on it right now. Maybe, who knows, but I think I need to pause and look at some other ideas before we continue down this route. Now, what's been going on? As you all know, starting out yesterday and throughout the day, we're talking a lot about what the heck we're doing with Citizen. It was still an ongoing question. Talked a lot yesterday at the beginning of the stream about, what it is that we're looking for, and we've had these objectives for a while: better interactions, better information, and more personal control, more creative control, things like that. And this term, a Lego set for social computing, has been sort of kicking around in my brain. And, by and large, ever since I took the break last week, what I've really been trying to think about when it comes to Citizen is what are we beyond a decentralized clone of Twitter or Facebook or something like that. And yesterday we brought up that phrase that Steve Jobs said defensively in a talk when somebody attacked him for ending OpenDoc, giving him a good old dose of "who the hell do you think you are?" Steve replied with, "You have to start from the people's experience, from the customer's experience, from the user's experience, and work backwards, as opposed to starting from some neat piece of technology and then saying, what can I do with this?" And that's really what I have been endeavoring to do, actually, for some time. I think any technologist or technology creator is going to have some trouble doing that, especially because, it's actually, you go in both directions, truth be told. You look at the technologies you have and say, what can I make with this? And then you stop and you say, okay, what do people want and what technologies do I have? So it's a little bit of an interplay. But, a lot about what I've been talking about, trying to understand what the purpose of Citizen is in large part sitting down and thinking about what people want and working backwards. And so after the stream yesterday, I sat and spent some time thinking about that a little bit more, and I spent some time this morning thinking about it a little bit more. And one of the things that's on my mind is, I'll just go through the thoughts as they came to me. The first one was, I started to actually ask a question, which is, how much do we expect people to be able to do with the HTML superset that we're building? Of course, we've demonstrated it to some degree with basically the ability to embed things like posts and feeds and comments and things like that, which is all pretty cool. But we've been starting to toy around with, okay, how far could we go with it? Could we go all the way to something like Notion? Yeah, possibly. Could you go even further? Could you get all the way to the point of something like a Visual Basic, or a Hypercore, basically making it an approachable, no-code programming environment? Hey, Anish, good to see you. And around that point, actually around the point of thinking about it in terms of Notion, is where I started to kind of stop and think, it's a complicated question. you can spend a lot of time working on something like that, and at the end of the day, you may still not be sure that you have a product that people want. And it was funny, I spent a little time watching some talks, especially one by, oh brother, I forgot his name, but a talk about, how we have, I hear this a lot from technologists, how we have this habit of making programming something that's of the priestly class, that the average person isn't allowed to access, and I agree a lot with that. And he was pointing out, we say things like, oh, well, that's not a real programming language, and so we kind of condescend to more limited environments. And the metaphor being employed was, it's like a novelist saying that, if you're not writing a novel, then you're not actually writing, things like that. All right. While I agree with that, there is a part of me that also kind of thinks, yeah, but that's also a classic trap for programmers, for technologists, that desire to create the next hypercard. And because part of me wonders, how important really is that? How much do people really want to have that? And I'm bringing that up because I want to trace that thread a little bit moving forward. The first way I want to look at it is, okay, from the perspective of this HTML, this HTML superset, the original reason for doing it was wanting not to have end users be able to build out custom interfaces. That was certainly a nice, interesting possibility. But actually, it was about giving developers, people building servers and custom behaviors for their communities and things like that, and their bots and what have you. It was about giving them tools to be able to represent custom behaviors in their system. So it was initially conceived of with an expectation that there was a back end that was being worked on, and what we were doing was creating a new kind of front end to enable them to render what their back end is doing, and to do so without having to ask for permission from the user to put some kind of custom UI on the page. We want to get away from permission prompts. And as I was thinking through some of the details of, like, well, let's say we're building a Notion. Let's just say Notion is our target, not Hypercard. Hey, Lorenzo, good to see you. Even then, cooking up a really flexible system is quite difficult, especially when you think about the challenges of performance. One of the things we use inside of the Citizen network currently is views. And we use these views because they are a much faster way to get something out of the feed. Even though the feed is not exactly fast, it's still a lot faster than if you were to do it all by doing remote table reads, because you effectively need to do joins, and not just joins, but aggregate joins. Give me posts from everybody that I'm following, and on top of that, for each of them, give me the number of comments and the number of all the reactions, and the author's profile information and things like that. All stuff which, truth be told, you really can't be trying to query over the network if you can't somehow bundle all of that together into a single round trip. You just don't want to be doing that back and forth. Table joins in a remote over the internet is just a bad idea. That was one of the things I started to think about. I was like, all right, well, if you don't really have a back end where you can start building out the custom views, performance is going to be difficult. And I started to imagine, we go through all the effort of building a highly customizable system like this, and then it just doesn't scale. Notion had a little bit of that problem themselves as things started to get more complicated. Understandable. It's very hard to create a sort of admin-less, a non-administered database. So that was one of the things I started thinking about. And then something else I started thinking about is, even when I do futz around with Notion, as approachable as it is, it's actually some complex pieces of software. Hey, Todd, good to see you. Thank you. Todd, you probably should watch the playback, but we're going to press pause on it right now, which kills me because I really love doing it, but I'll continue my line of thought. Watch the playback if you want to hear what's going on. Kills me, though, because I'm loving building that WYSIWYG. It's very fun as a programmer to work on. Not stopping it, not throwing it away, just pausing. But anyway, the complexity even of something like Notion is non-zero, because you have as a what you want to have when you're giving the users something like this is something like Excel, where you're directly manipulating the data and it's all very clear and right there in front of you. But as you would expect, once more complex interfaces come into play, you want to be able to show views of a piece of data and things like that, you inevitably become a database administrator as an end user, but without the kind of tools you would normally need to make it perform well. So, anyway, all that is to say that, well, and there's another one. There's another one that I started thinking about, which is that a lot of the interesting ideas about the HTML extension that we're talking about has to do with things about templating information. So somebody creates a new data schema, and we want to have a way to render it nicely within the network without having to install some kind of plugin for an end user, things like that, right? We want it all to be able to render nicely. And to do templating, really with the WYSIWYG, that's pretty brutal. I would, you know, if you think about how a templating language traditionally works, it's usually constructing the HTML and then putting things like doing mustache curly brackets in there to embed certain pieces of information, using curly brackets to do logic, things like that. And even if we don't use that, if we did it all entirely with HTML nodes, so to speak, so you're building like a tree structure that's building out how it gets rendered, it's pretty advanced stuff. You know, it's pretty advanced. And so there's definitely a part of me that's kind of looking at building out the WYSIWYG and thinking about having custom interfaces at the core of things and thinking, well, how truly connected to our value prop is it? I don't know yet. I don't know. But I'm going down this exploration because we have the performance challenges that will surface as we give people more flexibility. We have the complexity of dealing with the data as an end user, you know, as just a complex thing for the average person to be working with, perhaps so complex that you're losing the benefits of trying to make it approachable in the first place. And then you got the basic questions of the complexity of actually building out templated UIs, which is a big part of what we're doing here. Okay, so with all that in mind, that was one thread of thought that I was having about the HTML extension superset that we're working on in the WYSIWYG. Is there's some challenges. Simultaneously, going back to our question about what we're trying to do for people, we spent some time yesterday talking about, like, why was Facebook really valuable? Why does it continue to be valuable? What's the core value prop? And you could talk about, Facebook groups, right? That's how most people are using it now. But like CS posed the question, as CS put it, why do boomers love Facebook? And my answer, and you could probably disagree with me, but my answer was, well, because you can find people. That address book / person index, right? The search engine for finding people is really good. And that's always been core to the value prop. Even whenever it was cool with millennials, it was cool with millennials when we were still the young folks, when we were the Gen Zs of the time, because it was a address book for your university. And they had that fantastic hack for scaling up the address book by using .edu addresses. They were able to piggyback on the work that all universities were doing. The interesting thing about that is when you really think about what a social network is good for, if it's a personal network, if it's a person network, if it's about the identification, it's about identity, that's a pretty core thing that you want to have. And so if that was something that we decided that we were interested in, you would want to have, probably, as CS pointed out, the hack now would be trying to go off of existing social graphs, which is hard in of its own because all those companies are working very hard to make it more or less illegal to take the social graph from them, but there you have it. But there was, it was one of those things where it was a really good example of thinking about how you present a value prop to people, because working from the person's experience backwards, person's experience that they want to have is I type in somebody's name and there they are. Similarly with groups, I type in an interest, or I type in a kind of community, like for me, for instance, whenever a kid kept on getting lost, I went and found the Lost and Found Pets group in Facebook and jumped on there, right? So there's, in a way, what it's sort of revealing is the degree to which Facebook's core utility actually sort of matches the utility that Google has, in a way. It's about that index. And that's probably why it continues to be sticky for people that continue to use it, is they find the things that they want to find on a personal level. And so much of what we need to be thinking about here is what is the thing that we want somebody to be able to type in or something like that and be able to get. Now, one of the threads that I started pulling on as I was thinking about, okay, so thinking about that and thinking about how constructing pages, especially complex pages, is kind of a lot of work. And I started to kind of think about, well, how badly do we even really want to be manually constructing pages? Wouldn't it be nice, for instance, if pages were able to assemble themselves? And to some degree, that's a possibility. If you look at how Google does things, for instance, if you search for Africa by Toto, this is the interface you get. It's smart enough to know that this is a song, and it gives you this overview of basically all the results. And then over here you have a little thing so you can tab through what you might be looking for. The lyrics, you want to listen to the song, I'm sure this would be YouTube or, yep. And they even have links out to the other popular things. Other recordings, that's an interesting thing to have. I didn't know that Weezer had done that, right? So, I've never even clicked on the analysis. Oh, analysis of the song. There you go, right? And they do this kind of thing for all sorts of people. Let's search for Steve Jobs. You'll get the results over here, and then you get this action right here, right? An assembled interface. And of course, the reason they're able to do this is, there are many reasons, but one of the big ones is that they're leveraging things like Wikipedia and schema.org. So they have a nice semantic data set to work from. And they can say, okay, these are pictures of Steve Jobs, and this is a description of Steve Jobs, and this is a couple of facts about him. When was he born? When did he die? Who his spouse is? Things like that. Some quotes from him, things like that. They have all the structured information. And assembling an interface around that structured information is not exactly hard. It's not exactly easy in all cases either, but you have a data set, and you know more or less how to represent that data set. So this kind of gets in the realm of what you see is what you mean, as opposed to what you get. Those kinds of editors which are semantically oriented and sort of automatically know what to do with the content based on its meaning. So when you're thinking of, when we're thinking about the complexity about constructing pages and what would we think as a user and working backwards, what would we like? There's certainly a part of me that's like, well, why do I have to build an interface in the first place? Wouldn't it be nicer if the interface was built for me? It would be nicer. Now, simultaneously, Flavian, I believe. Flavian? Let me check that person's name real quick. I got mentioned by them last night. Flancian. They seem to go by either. Their username is Flancian, but their display name is Flancia with an exclamation point. So I don't know what they're talking about, but Flancia and Vera are two folks that you may have seen around. They're working on this project called, it's either Nagora or Agora. Let me pull it up real quick. Agora. It's called Agora, but it's sort of like a domain name is Agora, because the concept here is that Nagora is a distributed knowledge graph and experimental social network, and so agora.org is like one of the agoras. And so the idea that they're pursuing with this is a new kind of wiki, basically, or a new kind of knowledge graph. And Flancian has been kind of pinging me like, hey, come on, we ought to be working together on this kind of thing. And really, of course, key to what Agora is doing is these wiki links of the double brackets linking to becomes a link to some kind of topic. So Flancia pinged me yesterday talking about something along these lines. And, it's kind of got me thinking about that idea. We're talking about this idea of being able to type in something and have a page get assembled. And it's this, bringing up these sort of wiki links started to make me think about something that gets brought up a lot with the distributed systems, which is how people wish they could just claim a name, to use social address books, things like that. Simultaneously, one of the things we've been talking about that's kind of key to the challenges that we have is having a social graph that's a piece of infrastructure. the kind of idea, one of the ideas we're talking about is being able to put together a community. And wouldn't it be nice if you were just able to say, I only want nice people to show up at this community, right? Again, as I said the first time I brought that up, what constitutes nice is perhaps a troubled definition, since it's certainly subjective, and I don't know, I want to have a niceness rating being put on everybody, but there's something inherently, powerful to that idea when you're thinking in the realm of trying to create a community of people that are coming together. You make something, you want to share it, you want nice people to show up. Wouldn't it be nice if you just could say, nice people can comment on this? That is a sort of a general thing that you want, I think, out of a social graph, which is can have a lot of kind of ratings that you would want to have for somebody. For instance, I'm looking at a page about CTZN. Wouldn't it be nice if I could say, oh, I only want to see information from people who know what the hell they're talking about CTZN, right? Let's say about the CTZN tech. So I only want programmers, ideally programmers that have actually worked on CTZN, and I would fit in that category. Many of y'all would, because y'all have been following along for so long, things like that. And so all this melange, or this accumulation of ideas, got me into the thinking about basically the question of how search and the database functions as a layer underneath the system of CTZN. How does this data mesh kind of operate as a collective piece of infrastructure, and the need for that to be giving you good information? The whole point of many of the different components and UIs that we're bringing in here is that you can drop in something and it's going to query the network of the data mesh for information and fill it out in a relatively intelligent way, and that's what we get with things like post feeds. So, bringing all this together, you're in the space of things like, wouldn't it be nice if I could type in somebody's name and just find them? Wouldn't it be nice if I could assemble interfaces dynamically? And wouldn't it be nice if the information was structured with rankings, so that, and rankings are often about people in the system or authorities in the system, but also rankings of individual pieces of information. And so this got me into the frame of mind of, all right, what if we put all this together? What if we thought of CTZN as similar to what Nagora is trying to accomplish, a global database with a notion of a social subjectivity to it. For instance, what if the idea of how we're approaching this is that rather than having to build a bunch of pages or build a page for every time you want to do something, you could write a query. And that query might be something like, so here's an obvious, simple example. This is what your home feed currently does, post from my network. Or perhaps getting into the idea of identifying information. Or even so if you were to ask the network, if you were to run a query against your network, what you would be doing is querying the things that you are either following or have joined the community of, I imagine, and the results would come out. Pretty simple notion of search. In fact, the whole idea of like posts from my network, really what that would be is sort of like star as filtered to posts from my according to my network. And then you would have these right here, since they're somewhat general queries. But then, of course, if you wanted just posts about Paul Frazee, and this is not exactly a controversial set of ideas so far, If you look at how Facebook works, for instance, if you do a search on Facebook, it's going to give you the standard. It'll be somewhat like Google's thing, where one of these items is posts for them, and then they have things like events. So it's just different content type tabs. So far we're pretty traditional here, and the only kind of unique thing we're talking about is having the search only go against a network that you've constructed. So you're building a searchable index. And a searchable social index is what you're doing. So when you're following people, it's not just about getting their posts, it's about basically populating your index for search, right? And one of the things that strikes me as immediately interesting about this is that a kind of a socially constructed search index really directly ties in trustworthiness of information to the user's experience, which is something that I think gets really back to the heart of kind of the problem areas that we've been starting from about what we don't like about social media or about the web in general. The degree to which results show up in Google and you trust Google, but to a certain point. There are certain queries that are much more subjective. And that's an area where things like Google and things like Wikipedia start to feel a little bit like, yeah, well, it's a little bit political, what answers you're going to see there. So wouldn't it be nice if I had some kind of direct connection to how those search results were being constructed, who that information was coming from? It really starts to surface the authority model of information in a much more direct fashion when you start to think, okay, if when I type in Steve Jobs, I'm going to see results based on who I follow, and if I'm not satisfied with the results I'm seeing, now my next task would be to go out and to try to find other sources of information for that particular knowledge. And so then when you start kind of thinking along those lines, then you think, okay, well, so then something like a directory of users, if I want to have an address book that I can search for people, I might just follow or subscribe to or have some kind of terminology for indicating that I trust a database on the Citizen data mesh, which is designed to be an address book. So we'll call that Citizen book. I follow that thing, knowing that it curates a list of user accounts. And so now whenever I do a search and then I kind of narrow it down to people, I'm going against their data set that they're publishing. And if at some point I'm not terribly a fan of what they've put together, I could switch over to Megabook, some other competing thing where I could have both, right? Because they're both designed to be feeded to my index. And I can compare the results and see what I think. Perhaps even respond to the results by saying things like, I don't buy this result, this seems wrong to me, things like that. One other thing that we could bring into this is structuring the queries a little bit more. The nature of, this is a way, kind of the difference between being a wiki or a knowledge graph and being a search engine like Google or Bing or something like that, is that search engines, by and large, are general text. And they are often, the default conception of a search engine is to write a query which is searching against the contents of documents, the plain text contents of documents, looking for matches, and then you rank them using other signals. Whereas with a wiki, you're using a more structured system of, rather than just searching generally for Steve Jobs, you would go to the wiki Steve Jobs. So there's an actual kind of identifier under which that information is going to be put. So it's a difference between general queries and sort of a folksonomy, or in the case of Reddit, a very specific taxonomy. In the case of Wikipedia, a very specific taxonomy. It's a folksonomy when there's nobody controlling it from the top down. Wikipedia is highly curated in its thing, so if you do Steve with Steve Jobs without an underscore, I'm 99% sure it'll redirect me. Indeed it does. Because at some point somebody put in a redirect. So Wikipedia, while it is decentralized in its decision making, centralizes the result of those decisions. And that would be a fairly key difference compared to what we're doing. So it would be interesting, to be sure, to take this social database idea and rather than doing general search, which is, by the way, hard and a little more computationally expensive, and instead do a wiki link style of things, where I would, as somebody coming into the network, identify myself as Paul Frazee, and so then once you pop into the search results, if you're following me, my entry would show up there. And if somebody else gave the same kind of identifier to me, same thing, I would show up in those results. So you might want to actually, apply multiple different identifiers to yourself, and you're kind of getting into tags, effectively. And so then you might use a syntax like this to embed these wiki links within documents generally, so that whenever I'm running a post, it would be something along the lines of, "Hey everybody, working on Citizen today, check out the Citizen live stream." And then Citizen live stream would be something which, of course, I have put some entry under for what I'm doing today, maybe a Citizen Dev live stream, something like that. And so anybody that's following me would be able to click on that and find what I've put under that tag. And so you're going into dynamic page construction using what you see is what you mean kind of semantically driven page construction. And I believe this would be a more convenient way to be organizing information and producing databases, or producing interfaces. Because rather than having to, I'm going to work on, I want to create a page for the live stream. So, all right, step 1, create a page. Step 2, use the WYSIWYG to describe it, add a link to YouTube, etc. Step 3, share the page, things like that. So I'm creating now a Citizen Dev live stream, and maybe I even embed. Instead of kind of that very structured, you're having to do it all yourself, it would be instead the kind of thing where, like, I post then I click on it, and then I do create, let's say, fact. Well, let's say create link. And I'm done, right? So rather than kind of this page-oriented approach where I'm sitting there and I'm sort of manually constructing everything, instead it's more about producing, this is the kind of the key action. The step 1 here is just, you could do it this way, or the first thing I could do is just go to, another way, flow that this could happen is, like that. So rather than having to think in terms of, I'm creating a page and this is the page that you go to learn about the Citizen Dev live stream, and it's a page that I own and things like that. Instead, I'm just going to produce a record, a semantic record of some type, which is just a link that'll get categorized under Citizen Dev live stream, put it in there. And you can do some interesting things. For instance, all these queries, they are subjective, which means that they're going to be according to somebody, right? So you could actually consider in the application, in the citizenry application, you consider the context by which you found a link. For instance, if you click on Citizen Dev Livestream, obviously an obvious thing to do would be to have it surface results from my personal network. But another thing you could do is have it surface results according to the person that shared that link. So if I click on that link from a post by Paul Frazee, then you're going to see Paul Frazee's answers to what that means. And then you'd have some kind of UI in there saying, see what other people think, see what your network thinks, things like that. Which gets interesting for things like the address book kind of thing. Because if somebody were to share, I talked to Paul the other day, that could mean a lot of people. So it might be rather interesting to be able to click on that link and see, if this was Alice speaking, see who Alice meant, or probably meant when they said Paul. And then from there, you'd be able to say, all right, well, that's the rest of my network. Who does the rest of my network think Paul is? That kind of thing. And then, it's kind of interesting because you're building sort of a social database. And the address book nature, the who people are, would be rolled into that. So the identity layer would be fairly rolled into that. So what would this application be? What would the experience of this application be? It would be, by and large, it would tap into a couple of different things. One of them is the kind of convenience of being able to click on these, what I might call them topics. You click on a topic and just start adding information and finding information. It's a very low friction to basically accumulating a database. It makes following people an opportunity to expand your database in an interesting and meaningful way. And it gives you some opportunities to kind of respond to the information. I think probably the assembled page, the results of a given topic would have some kind of feedback mechanism for you as an individual, perhaps to say, to sort of affirm the piece of information there, or to disagree with the piece of information there. And so it's a low friction, people getting together and putting together useful information with each other. There's an inherently kind of collaborative aspect to it. And then if you're thinking about what this experience is more broadly, like what the kind of extrinsic motivators are for it, there's a real opportunity to gain influence by dint of doing this kind of work. It's the sort of thing where if you become popular on this kind of a system, you're populating people's databases. It's almost like being a well-regarded wiki contributor for domains that you know something about. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that it seems like it's resonating a bit with you, Melanie, and I'm interested to hear literally everybody that showed up so far and said hi. I would love to hear all your thoughts about what I'm talking about here. While y'all are kind of mulling it over, one of the other things that I think about with this is one of the things I've been thinking for a while, in fact, is that the modern newspaper, or the newspaper of the future, let's put it more specifically, an internet native newspaper is not what we have now. I've talked about this a couple times, but an internet native newspaper should not be the sort of thing where it looks like a newspaper. The point of any news organization, any journalistic organization like that, is to provide information and media. And it always strikes me as bizarre that the way that we've conceptualized that is just with the notion of articles. It seems to me that a modern newspaper's role ought to be giving you information that somehow works its way into your computing environment. So that if I'm following the New York Times in this data mesh, what I ought to be seeing are things like good information about the results of an election, and I can see that's according to the New York Times. I can evaluate it on those merits, and if I want to check the weather, I should see the results from weather.com or whatever weather agency I pulled from. There's something about, and I also kind of think that they ought to be curating comments and moderating comment sections, and that should actually be a major part of an information company, of a media company. Something about, it's kind of like, it really touches on like a version of Google, but one which is personalized. And people have tried personalized search in the past, and it's never really been a big winner, but I don't know. Seems like there's still some kind of an opportunity there. I do also think one of the things that I quite like about it is how it does reflect upon this question of trusting information, which is such a important topic right now when it comes to the internet broadly. Because it's, you know, the flip side, of course, is saying that it produces a filter bubble. Not wrong. I've never been terribly compelled by arguments about filter bubbles. I kind of think that it's something that we over pivot on. I think probably more important is having information that you trust. And one of the ways that I would articulate that is if my filter bubble excludes bad actors, then it's working correctly, you know. Everybody kind of talks about the filter bubble that as if it includes bad actors or it limits your scope of knowledge, but a lot of people I really just don't want to hear from. And I kind of feel like it's a pretentious thing to say that people are unable to make that decision for themselves. Might in some ways just be a reaction to the ways that some people do use this kind of stuff. We used to call it the echo chamber. Now it's called the filter bubble. Same thing. So, you know, there's definitely some veracity to that. But on the flip side, it feels a little bit like you're running against human nature. Yeah. And that paternalistic instinct, I think, that easily emerges from distrusting echo chambers and filter bubbles and things. No question that moderation is work and that not everyone wants to make it for themselves. And look, I also think that people kind of misunderstand just how you hear the words propaganda and you think something really specific, like the films being produced by Nazi Germany. But another term that I like to use is your information environment. Because an information environment is just kind of like what you see on a day-to-day basis in a low-key fashion. And to really understand that, you have to think about how advertising works. A lot of people, it's the same thing. They say, ads never work on me. I never see an ad for Crest and then just feel motivated to jump up and go buy some Crest toothpaste. That's not the point of those ads. The point of those ads is to make Crest feel like a fixture of your information environment. If you see Crest ads all the time, you're not going to go out there and even have any kind of meaningful connection to it. But when you go into the toothpaste aisle and you're looking around, you'll recognize Crest as something that is a part of your environment. It is, okay, yeah, that's it's a trusted brand. It's been around for a long time. It's one of the, I see them everywhere. So, it's about creating a sense of permanence. So I do think that by and large people are not sensitive to the degree to which their information environment influences them. If you see the same thing repeated multiple times, or the same sentiment repeated multiple times, it affects your view of the world. It just does. And I think it has a lot of different categories. I'm really not a big fan of talking about counter-narratives unless you really know what you're talking about. And I think we engage in counter-narratives all the time in an irresponsible fashion. A really good example of this is the lab leak hypothesis of COVID, where people have this, the lab leak hypothesis is that COVID was created in a lab and was accidentally leaked out of the lab. You might think, well, that's not necessarily anything wrong with talking about that, but my main problem with doing so is, one, if you don't have proof of it, don't speculate about it. That's a broad principle. But number two, it's a counter-narrative. It fundamentally, it's not even about what that narrative is about so much as it's a conspiracy or it's conspiratorial thinking. It's something counter to the current beliefs of the world, and counter-narratives, when you imbue yourself in them significantly, you get into a frame of mind of distrusting basically every mainstream narrative. And I think people are generally really bad at parsing between when they should be or shouldn't be trusting the mainstream narrative, and I think that's in part because they listen to counter-narratives all the time, so their brain's always going at, okay, how is this probably not the full truth? It may be, but it's such a useless thing to kind of geared into without having a high degree of intellectual honesty. Most people can't look at something like the lab leak hypothesis, and I'm being really pretentious and self-indulgent here, but the way I would say it is, yeah, it's totally possible. I don't think it's significant. I don't think it's worth talking about. I also think it needlessly puts China in a bad light. I've got major problems with China, but I just don't see the value of engaging in that kind of thought process. And again, I think that's a toxic thing for individuals to deal with over a long period of time, to keep on hearing about the conspiracy behind every possibility. So anyway, information environment is really important. And this doesn't necessarily help with that. But what it does do, again, is help with the fact that we don't trust, and rightfully so, entities that gain a whole lot of power, especially over information, which is exactly where we're at now, where a lot of the distrust comes from. And so I think, again, so much a big part of decentralization is, I think that information should be curated and moderated, but I also think that if the environment is such that it's all done from the top down, you're going to lose trust in the entire environment. So you have to have some capacity for individuals to push back on the sources of information, to exert some amount of choice, and for decision making to be made in a distributed fashion. And that's really what's inherent to what we're constructing here. Especially because there are lots of kinds of information that can't be properly given to you from the top down. Some of that information is just stuff that small groups of people should be, are the only ones that can, though. No mainstream organization is going to be able to tell you what's going on with Citizen. Alex says, gain of not quite. I kind of think I get what you're getting at. I mean, look, how to have effective viral labs. Of course, that's an important thing, but that's the kind of thing that, it's a really specific conversation. Probably needs to happen amongst people that know what the fuck they're doing, have some effect on the decision. For everybody in the, I'm maybe a little bit different in how I view this kind of thing than most people, but for all of us to be idly, what I think is gossiping about it as a citizenry, I think is kind of fucking useless. Unless you're, I have a really specific view about how public discourse ought to operate, and that I consider all public discourse to be some form of PR, with some kind of objective behind it. Even whenever you're just a random person posting on Twitter. And I think none of us think responsibly about that. Because have you ever heard the big C conversation be nuanced and interesting and intellectually objective and things like that? It never is. It's always some kind of agenda, some kind of perspective being spoken about in the lowest common denominator fashion. People are it's just gossip when it's at that high of a level. And then every once in a while, we're lucky enough to get some really in-depth think piece that comes out where you're actually edified about the topic, and then you move on. It's pretty rare that political action is directly tied to these kinds of things, which is why we're all doom scrolling, because we're all talking about things that are complex topics and that we have no effect on, and yeah. So I've got pretty atypical views about that. You know, I am in some parts talking about kind of aggregate behavior here. It's something which I wouldn't really try to control or seek to control by any specific means. This is just kind of this is kind of like why it's in that same realm of discussion about, like, should you be engaged with the news? Is that an important part of being an informed citizen? And some people, you know, really believe that you have to stay up on everything. And there's a part of me that's kind of like, I'm not sure that's really true. And that's, of course, not exactly a atypical perspective either. But it's kind of like the systemic version of I'm just asking questions. You know, the I'm just asking questions person is the person who brings up something controversial or brings up something that is a difficult thing to talk about, or is a counter-narrative, or any number of things that it has some kind of effect on people. But they don't have an agenda, they're just asking questions. I think there's a similar thing, though. I'm just informing the public about how you're kind of an asshole. I'm just informing the public about that one fuck-up you did. A lot of it's just gossip. But of course, being the arbiter of that sort of stuff is unwise. You shouldn't have an arbiter of it. But certainly the way that I'll be constructing my personal social graph is people who are like-minded on that front. I'm mostly going down this rabbit hole because having talked through all this idea, I now don't really know what to dive into to act on this. I guess the next thing to do would be to, to try to throw together a proof of concept. The overridden window is the arbiter. Yeah, right. Which is basically a kind of distributed consensus of social consensus. Kind of one philosophical question you could pose about this is, like, would you be willing to sacrifice some kind of awareness of corruption, let's say, in order to produce social harmony? Interesting question to dwell on. So what back-end changes am I thinking about to accommodate this new focus? You're focusing me here. So I think to accomplish something like this, I'm going to use the bathroom and get a Red Bull, and then we can dive into it. Really procrastinating. Be right back. Alright. So, first decision point, this is a key decision point, is how the querying structure is going to operate. I don't think it should be general text search. I don't think the right way to do this is just like indexing all the words inside of posts and pages and things like that, and then making that searchable. There's nothing wrong with that kind of approach necessarily. It's just costly, number one, and noisy, number two. And generally speaking, hard to get good results for in the design of like what we're talking about here. Like, I wouldn't want to have a search engine where I couldn't evaluate the results consistently and improve on the algorithm. So, general search, I think we need to, if we're going to build a search or a queryable database like this, I think we need to leverage structure so that end users have some capacity to manage it directly. So I think this concept of topics or tags should be a key part of how this operates. I'm also inclined to say you could do it in such a way that like hashtags, where if you want to mark something as being under a topic, you give it a hashtag. But I kind of fucking hate hashtags, so I don't think we should do it that way either. Especially one of the things that I dislike about hashtags is that they don't assert a directionality. For instance, let's say this post right here, I talked to Paul the other day. Does that make this post about me? Is this something that should show up in the results? Or is this just a link to that thing? Now, I'd be happy for this to show up in backlinks, but if the same way that we had describing something like my profile is I am Paul, that's very hard to evaluate from the outside which one of these, kind of the directionality of an in-text tag like that. And then you also run into, one of the reasons I hate hashtags is that you then have to like put into the content all the things you want to be tagged as, etc. And that's a fucking nightmare too, right? So I think the way that the topics or tags ought to operate is as some kind of separate record, which is, I think we'll just call them a tag because tag suggests, I think, the right kind of information, and it would be yeah, I don't think we need to. I think what we should have is these wiki links style of things to point to topics, but they're not tags in and of themselves. So if I made a post then I would create a tag record separately. Like that. So there's just, tags don't get generated by extracting them out of text. There are links, I guess we call them tag links or topic links. Or just topics. Topic links, that's probably right. Which are links to those things and might get, we might index them as backlinks, but they're not tags. They're links. So then, the query is relatively straightforward. It would just be, you'd have an index where the items would be along the lines of along those lines. And I guess it actually can't be a slash, it should be a colon. And so then to query, you would do similar to a feed query, where you effectively we don't actually use SQL, but yeah. So it'd be along these lines, right? You run the query asking the tags index for a given topic, and then you'd be trying to pull the actual subject. Possibly leveraging the, you might kind of produce your output, you'd want to produce a array of the resulting subjects, and you'd want to know the subject schema, which would be things like post, and then you'd want to know the tags, and that would be an array of the, or let's say tagging users maybe, because there's not actually any additional information, but then, so who tagged it, of course also the subject record. So, out of that query you're getting the subject schema would be encoded inside the record, so, So out of that query, you would get a list of different pieces of information, and then the results page would need to try to come up with some kind of intelligent way of deciding how to render all that kind of information. Now, in the current design, our existing schemas are geared more towards things like you got comments and you got reactions, you got posts, follows, pages, profiles. So by and large, at the present stage, the way that would operate is really purely along the lines of giving a list of posts and things like that, and maybe you'd be able to show a profile card or more than one profile card, along the side. But it's pretty conceivable that we could introduce new schemas for this sort of thing along the lines of images, events, facts, things like that. So we can create new taggable schemas, because now there'd be something interesting to do with it. And then assembled page would probably, I mean, something that's kind of interesting to think about is like, to what degree are these pages not just search results, but actually a page, right? Like, let's say there's like, let's take a look again at how Google puts it together, right? It's not just search results, it's actually just the topic. And so there are images over here, and there would be presumably a way to add more images. And there are facts here, and there would presumably be a way to add more facts. So this page would be rather structured. And it's less about seeing search results and more about constructing the page. And so then these tabs here would not be like, wouldn't really be so much about filtering down the search results so much as switching between different kinds of views on the topic. So like a discussion view or discussion page. Yeah, let's call it view, discussion view. I can't call them views because we have that concept already, but we'll call them pages. The discussion, no, we already used page too. Anyway, discussions and I mean, maybe it's a drill down on the individual things like images and facts and things like that. People. Of course, it also sort of depends. You may need to bake into it a notion of disambiguation similar to like what Wikipedia does. Because presumably, for instance, there's going to be more than one Paul in a network, and so if you're landing on just Paul, you might want to have a concept along the lines of a record for linking to other topics, to other tag topics that are more specific. So in a given results page, you would have probably a disambiguation section along the lines of other tags that might be more precise. Kind of similar to the people also ask, but what did Steve Jobs really do for Apple? What was his motto? I actually love, I mean, I'm really curious if that really is something that people Google a lot. Who the fuck has a motto? Like, oh yeah, I've had this motto all my life. From a young age, I decided to stay hungry, stay foolish, and that would be my motto. Now, stay hungry, stay foolish was one of their marketing campaigns. Pretty sure I heard that last on a Levi's commercial. All right. Well, I'm just going to force myself to make forward motion. We're going to sub-branch both of the backend and the front end with subjective search engine, and let's just jump into building that tag schema. I'm gonna close that, free myself from the scratch pad for a little bit. Say there's a 64 character limit on topics. Let's also enforce a pattern. Alphanumerics and spaces. Interesting question. What can we allow in tag topics? Spaces are actually kind of crappy because at the end of the day, topics are going to need to be in URLs quite a bit, which is why Wikipedia uses underscores. I suppose we should allow dashes as well. Of course, the trick about using dashes is that people then get confused about when to use a dash versus when to use an underscore. I assume in a wiki link, when you use a space, that would get replaced with an underscore. How does Wikipedia handle things with dashes in them? Trying to think of a word that would, or some Wikipedia article that would have to have a dash in it. Coming up empty. Maybe if I click around, I'll eventually find something. There we are. Okay, so they actually do dashes. Makes sense. Alright. Cool with that. Everything else looks fine. So that's the tag table, and we'll add the tag table to the citizen database community database. And I suppose we'll need a tag index. Tags and reactions. Pretty similar schema-wise. So an interesting question for us as we're constructing this tags index. Our queries are slightly different than what we need for reactions. For reactions, you really are just looking to identify grab all the reactions for a given piece, for a given record. But in this case, we actually need to be able to run queries which are not just give me all the tags on a topic, but also match things according to a set of authors. So it's not just about the tags for a given record, it's actually also about who produced the tags. Which might actually be you could just query the source set. That might actually be the fastest solution. Obviously, having a index of it is faster because you're not having to hit multiple databases. But it's an optimization we can bring in later. So the tag index really just tells us about the tags that have been created. So going from a tag index goes from record backwards to all the tags on it. And the source records tells us all the tags by a given person for a given topic. So it's going to be similar to the feed query sampling, at least at first. call it the tags for. Tags for record index. Since there could be other indexes that we want in the future, just need to make this more specific. Okay, that seems right. How badly do we need this index? Yeah, we need it, yeah. Alright, let's toss in that indexer. I'm starting to feel like we have too many schemas. A lot of schemas. Okay, so I don't think we need to actually fetch the subject record. Anybody can tag anything. Okay. Are we gonna need a view? Probably, I guess. Actually, do we need that view? We should be able to just query. No, it's on the server, but you could just ask the server. That may have been something I did back before you could actually query the server just tables. Oh. Thought you were goofing around at first. Yeah, I don't know if we need this view. Maybe in the future, but not now. Probably one view we do need, though, is a topic records view. That's quite a view right there. Should be interesting. I think for the moment I'm just going to do who you follow as opposed to it makes sense for communities to be in there, but for now I'm just going to do who you follow. Okay, yeah. Tell you what happened. I got a little too experimental with it. You too. But yeah, what ended up happening was, flat map. So I was doing long on the top, shaved on the sides, you know, with the dyed hair on the top and everything. And it wasn't the bleaching that screwed me up. I decided to go even shorter on the shave on the sides. Not all the way to like skin, but just like, you know, real short so you can kind of see the scalp and everything. And it did not look good. Turns out there was such a thing as too short on the sides. So I was like, alright, gonna have to buzz the whole thing. There it is. I wonder if it's faster. I did not. But part of the pandemic has really gotten me to this stage of being. This is Swift. I've gotten really. Bench. I've gotten really comfortable I've gotten really comfortable messing with my own hair on account of the pandemic, which I actually enjoy. Just feeling comfortable enough to cut my own hair, but but at any rate, well, I may set up too aggressive of a test case here. At any rate, getting your hair did. Oh, I got a barber and everything. The only reason I didn't go to, so I go to Birds, which is, you know, good enough kind of chain hair salon. Yeah, I like the highlights. As soon as my hair grows back out, I'm going back and getting it dyed again. It's just that getting it dyed not only takes a long time, it also costs like $200, $250. It's pretty pricey, you know, so it's like, can't really do it all the time. So as soon as my hair grows back out, though, got my pennies saved up, and I'll go get it dyed again. That's my favorite hairstyle right now. It's just the straight up dyed hair. The shave sides weren't bad though. It was fun. Okay, I think my test case is. Oh, now it's running. I think I just created too much data. Million. You can do this, come on. I'm actually getting pretty financially stable, thanks in large part to y'all's Patreons, which is great. But looks like Peter is going to be able to put more funding into the company, which is great to keep us going. And then I was gifted an Ethereum back in December, and Ethereum keeps on going to the moon. So, should have enough money to survive for a little bit. Well, I dig that. My game plan with Ethereum is I'm betting that it's gonna. Yeah, I'm really quite happy. And actually, what's funny is that the Patreon donations have been really solid, so I'm kind of been feeling comfortable in general, or just, you know, a little more secure. It's not, you know, my monthly expenses right now are around $3,000 a month, and I'm not quite at 1,000 yet, but like it's still a big deal. It's true, man. Chicks dig the dyed hair. Which, of course, you know, for a bachelor like me, that's what it's all about. But anyway, my current strategy with the Ethereum is I'm waiting until it hits 14,000, and then I'm cashing out. That's my number. It's an aggressive strategy, but seeing as it wasn't my money that I put in, I feel kind of comfortable playing the gambit here. Its price has been going nuts. Chicks dig the cat. It's true. My neighbor, 2 doors down, I was going out for a Mother's Day thing, and as I'm walking to try to get to the car, I gotta get going, and my neighbor has started fostering a litter of 4 kittens. Couldn't be more than 3 weeks old. They were all right there outside of her door with the mama cat and everything. It's very, very difficult for me to tear myself away from that situation. Okay, so let's try running this again with a slightly smaller source set. But it looks like actually doing flat map is faster than doing array.flat. My guess is that you're getting a benefit of reducing your number of iterations. Yeah, it's significantly faster. Because like if you test case 1 here, I know this is probably hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in. So if you do an iteration over r.flat, you're actually doing 2 iterations through the array. There's the flat, which returns the new array, whereas flat map, I would presume, is doing 1 iteration of the array, so I think that's why it's faster. That's why I wanted to test with that bench. Oh yeah? That's fun. I am just a total sucker for kittens, though. Oh, you know what? I can't even do it like this. Yeah, this isn't gonna work. This is not going to be a terribly fast query, I'm afraid. You know what? I think topics need to be case insensitive. Or more specifically, lowercase only. I think that's the only way that we can avoid complexities around people using capitals in some cases and not in other cases. Okay, I'm gonna use the bathroom real quick while I run this test, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay. I could have sworn that comment was a valid JSON schema. Does it have to be $comment? $comment. Oopsie. Little mistake there. I think other than the other than these schema screw-ups, I think we actually had a working I think the code worked on the first try. Yeah, how about that? Sweet. Good night, Anish. Great to see you. Some order indeterminacy. Anybody else fucking hate writing tests? Alright, one last thing we need to do is add in the ability to, or add in a test rather, for a specific source. Alright, and we also ought to check what following. We know following will work fine. Let's just make sure that untagging should work fine as well. Okay, we're all good. So our tagging backend infrastructure is ready to go. Interesting. Nope, nothing. I have a theory. Yeah. How much I want to bet that somewhere around here. This didn't tags for record IDX. I wrote to the wrong index. That's a pain. Okay. I have the tools to fix my database. Yes. And here's how. We're going to go to rebuild the indexes, and it will be specifically you and you. And now I should be able to refresh. Still writing to the wrong index by the looks of it. How's that still happening? What the hell? Rebuild, maybe the rebuild indexes call doesn't delete the current ones, current values. Let's see here. It should. Huh. Somehow it must be because the... Yeah, interesting. Must be struggling with the deletion on account of the key not forming properly. Or something along those lines. So I somehow have to get rid of this one. Well, why don't I just make life a little easier on myself? Try manually deleting it. Oh, you know what that might be. In fact, I know what that is. The list call is running validation, so it's actually filtering out the bad value. That should finally fix that little ellipsy there. Here we are. Stupid bug. All right. So. Alright, so now we've got that. Now for search, I'm pretty sure we'll want to make it so that whatever it is you enter automatically becomes the kind of top result. Take you to that topic page. And then eventually we'll want to include a query against all known topics to give you some kind of autocomplete on that, but we'll get to that later. So we're going to want to have something, of course, a little more meaningful than just tags, I think, over time. Perhaps a kind of a meaning to the tag. Because sometimes, tagging something might mean that it's related, but it might also be something like indicating that's who this is, or that's what this is. So you're not just tagging the topic, you're saying, for the topic Paul, you might say Paul is this person. Interesting possibility. You're gonna have to hit the playback on this one, Michael. It just occurred to me, we may not want to actually fetch the, have this view actually include the information of the records, which would help with performance, but we may just want to actually fetch the records individually as we go. that later. I'll have to fix that up at some point. So a couple thoughts. First is that I actually don't think comments should show up on a page like this. Unless it's like a comment that's like somehow like on the topics per se. I think it gets a little complex when it works that way. I think probably because the thing to think about here is like, so from here, the way this is going to go, the purpose of this whole page is to not look like search results. It's not about search results. It's actually about being a dynamically constructed page, similar to like a wiki. When they're like, the right way to do this, in fact, why don't we do it on pages first? Obviously, that UI is going to need some work. But the point is that it's actually a structured page, right? You're supposed to be able to fill it out as well as see who added things and kind of talk about the tags themselves. You know, okay, like I don't think this post belongs here, that kind of thing, like that. So if you wanted to bring a comment in, I think the way that that would have to work is by some kind of like quote tweeting a comment in a way. Like you'd create a post or a page or something like that, some kind of container record that embeds the comment and then put it in there. And having a thing like profiles is really not what this should be. It should be more like more along these lines of like, so, you know, who is this? You wouldn't want me showing up there. You would actually want, for Citizen, you wouldn't want that. But you'd want something kind of similar. So the whole point would be like it's not just about kind of categorizing things by tag. It's actually much more about structuring out this page. So I think the next step in this process would be to think about basically how this page is supposed to get constructed. And then think more about the data model. Because the different pages will want to have different kinds of information, you know? Things like image galleries, things like, you know, you got to think about what kinds of pages you might want to have. Citizen is a project, so the thing that you would Liquid.js. Oh. Gosh. I think I only use Liquid in the Citizen.network website. If you're looking at the Citizen.network website, that's just a static website, so that's why it's using Liquid. The application of Citizenry is using Lit. I agree, Agora reminds me of that as well. So anyway, I think probably the next step would be to think about like what kind of information should these, like what kind of pages might be put together on something like this. Like some of these would be for people, some of them would be for projects, some for organizations, some for concepts, similar to like how any wiki is dealing with. And then you would think about, all right, so what kind of sections would want to be in here, which is actually sort of another way of saying like what kinds of categories of informational semantics would we want to have in there. Like who is this is kind of like not just, it's not enough just to have a tag, it's more about having a relationship being established. So tag may not end up being the right semantic. It may be more correct to say something like a fact or a relation, a connection, something like that. Like we may need to kind of go knowledge graphy with it. And then you just have lots of different relations, like being able to assert things like so citizen is a project, citizen, Paul Frazee is a person, things like that. Oh, okay. Yeah, so, So yeah, I think the kind of thing to think about is like the construction of these topic pages. It's kind of like what kind of relations what UI sections would be interesting pieces of information to fill out. It doesn't all have to be factual. Like one of the things I strongly expect to do is to like create a page like this that's like Paul's pictures, or something like that, and have it as a way to like, then add a photos section and like toss up photos and things like that, or a cats topic and be able to throw cats into it, that kind of thing. So we may need to get some kind of knowledge graph edge. The tag may need to be more like a knowledge graph edge. Not necessarily, Michael. Like, I think the way that that would go is you'd go to like, and this ought to be showing for more things, so 1 second. So you see something akin to this, not exactly this, but something akin to this. You'd see it kind of like a blank slate, almost like a template for what the page can contain. And then you would be able to click on things to start filling it out. So it's really getting back to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is sort of rather than having people manually assemble pages, instead kind of thinking like, no, you know, we could do something, we could do an automatic construction because we have semantic information. So there'd be sections for things like facts about this, or general description, or things like that. You might even be able to have, it might even have like multiple different views, right? Where it's like, you land on a thing like this and like because like a view at the end of the day is just kind of choosing the layout of what sort of things to assemble there. And if it's a person, if the topic is a person, you'd have something very different than a thing like espresso. It'd be very different than an organization, or very different than a project, things like that. So you might have different layouts which would kind of change the template, and they could live side by side, because this, again, just kind of choosing which facts to display and in what way. So you would land on it and you would choose the thing, the kind of the layout for, it might say something like there's nothing here, or it might indicate like where something is, that kind of stuff. Might also try doing it along the lines of different is-as, almost like a disambiguation thing, where it's like you declare an is-a for, so is espresso is a thing. I'm fairly familiar with Wikidata, but I'll give it another look. But yeah, it might be that each view is a different is-a assertion. So espresso is a thing, and then you would have a set of templates there, and if somebody creates espresso is a person, that would also show up in the kind of list of options. And if there are no is-as expressed yet, then you might have a list of picking one and start filling it out. Might even want to bake in disambiguation, given that like there can be more than one, like Paul is a really good example, right? Like if you land on a Paul page, you could have more than one is a person's. So the kind of disambiguation might just kind of be baked into it along this is-a's line of thinking. And if there's only one is-a currently, then yeah, that's an interesting way to think about this. Possibly. Yeah, I mean, it should, again, the way this gets assembled is along the lines of like who you're following, so you should have some kind of relationship with who it is that's creating these things, and probably some kind of capacity to be able to like see an asserted thing. Yeah. Probably, I doubt it'll be along the lines of codifying. I mean, it could end up being a kind of thing where a trust graph ends up getting codified for like people and different kind of topics and things like that. But probably it'll be more along the lines of, you know, it's a general follows thing, and if you see something being posted that you're like, I don't think that's right, you could like comment on it and be like, hey, I think you missed X, Y, or Z, or possibly even like downvote or remove. You know, could go in that direction. Yeah. Could also have something in the related people section there. Good sources on this topic. Basically, a way of recommending you follow somebody for a given, you know. Yeah, there's a really interesting intersection of what this whole experiment, this whole exploration is doing. That's a combination of knowledge collection and also just like UI convenience. You know, like these topic pages are really make life a little bit more convenient in terms of just like assembling or producing information and content and things. You know. All right, I'm going to take a few notes about where my head's at after this little experiment and then call it a day. Tags are insufficient. Really more of a knowledge graph relation edge declaration. E.g., X is about Y topic, or a topic can have multiple views, possibly rooted in is a assertion, e.g. a person topic would have a different set of terms than a Alright. Interesting. This feels pretty cool, though. This feels fun. It's unique. It's interesting. It's doing something that isn't out there. I really like the convenience of the UI being constructed for you. So there's kind of like an intellectual, conceptual / abstract benefit to it, as well as a just a practical value to it in terms of like making things, certain kind of things easier. The auto-assembled UI could be really handy. Well, I'm gonna noodle on this tonight. Thanks, Melanie, for pushing me to actually get some code written. Low energy today. I think like I said yesterday, I kind of knew I was gonna blow all my energy yesterday if I didn't stop, and lo and behold, been just kind of sluggish today. Yeah, the auto-constructed UI could be pretty potent. Could be pretty interesting. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining me, as always. Have a great rest of your Tuesday evening or beginning of your Wednesday, depending on what time zone you're in, and I'll see you all tomorrow on the next Let's Build Citizen live stream. Catch you later.
Citizen.